So while we could have an entire conversation on CB1 receptors I need to divert us, otherwise we actually might end up making this whole show about
Well, he is a chef and a doctor, so it wouldn't be completely off topic.
Yeah, it wouldn't be completely off topic. So, I mean, look, if we circle back to that, it is funny to me how many things like we're finding out about, like, oh, it binds to this, it binds to that, like, and then you're like, oh, and it helps you sort of understand so much more about whatever the past conversation was, right? Like Tom was talking about absinthe and CB1. I'm like, oh, okay, I can kind of see that. I mean, now that makes sense to me. I mean, you can kind of follow the bouncing ball, as it were. You know what I mean?
Well, to take it back to like quantum theory, right? It's all connected.
No, definitely.
Things are always connected. And, from my food perspective, that's a big focus right now. That like there's a lot of talk about ultra processed foods, and one of the issues is that it's not something that is naturally connected to us. It's artificial. There's this idea, which I think has really been kind of promoted by the industry and the factors at large, if you will, that there's kind of a natural evolution of food. So like one day where cave people were, hunting spearing fish and hunting woolly mammoths, and we were having, dino burgers or whatever at the campfire. And then, it progressed, but it was all kind of natural food. And that somehow ultra processed foods are just that natural evolution. It's the next natural thing. But it's not, quite frankly, it's quite a foreign substance. And where we come through, Tom and talking with Daniel and others about, what we do, we look at that very differently. So, to the point of us talking earlier about, the quantum aspect of things, the way I've evolved, and I teach the culinary medicine course, we actually look at food from an information perspective, and that brings kind of a lot of that quantum relationship into things. And quite very simply, as a chef, it's so intuitive to me because food tells a story. As chefs, we want to put our spin on that story, but food has a story, and it's quite simple, right? So, Matt, you were talking about one gin can have all the same ingredients as another gin, and they taste completely different.
Yeah, 100%.
Right. So why? How is that? How is that possible? Well, it's all these other factors that go into it. It tells a different story. Maybe the ingredients were grown in a different place. It was handled slightly different. All that's information, and that information is a real thing. And when you look at ultra processed foods, how we look at it is it's sort of garbage language. It's not giving us valuable information. And in fact, in some ways, it's tricking our body into and making it work harder to try to understand what that information is, where nature speaks in very simple tones. And we also have a gut microbiome that everybody talks a lot about. And
especially Instagram.
More than you ever wanted to know about somebody.
Let's talk about my poop.
Talk about entanglement. But I actually saw again looking through the some of the other guests who've been on, and somebody who's talked about quantum and quantum entanglement. That's a way to look at it, and people get all freaked out about it. And Einstein's like, this is spooky distance. It is until you look at it like maybe I just like perpetually a 3-year-old, but look at it really simply, which is it's part of the same system. So if you randomly take an electron and a positron somewhere in the universe, they're not entangled, and none of that quantum weirdness happens. But if you say they're part of the same system, then what you know about one, you know about the other, because it's connected. And so that's how we look at the gut microbiome. It's like we're entangled with our gut microbiome because that particular collection, all those different things, which we'll just call the gut microbiome, they co-evolved to co-metabolize the food we eat. And so it's really entangled with who and what we are.
I love that because that sounds like Chinese medicine, Chinese herbal medicine, Chinese food medicine, it's all like right there. Here's the properties of this, and it always is interesting to me to see all these trends coming out. Right? You know, whether it's vegetarianism, veganism, paleo, keto. The one thing that happens when you do all of that is you removed ultra processed foods, right? Like it doesn't eat all veggies. You're not eating something out of a box, right? Eat all meat. You're not eating something out of a box.
Yeah.
Although I have a lot of vegetarian and friends.
I'm sorry to hear that.
I've seen them eat some of the worst crap available, because it's like, well, you know, I'm eating my vegetarian sausage. I was like, what in the world is that made from?
Some of the most unhealthy people I know are
processed. You know,
and
it's not that you can't do it right. It's just that, like, when it comes out of a box, when it's packaged to be a replacement for something else, this is like, you know, this is going to get out there, but not out there. It's still medical. But this is like the difference between Primpro and Premarin for women's hormone replacement and bioidentical hormones, right? We've got something that kind of looks like something, it kind of fits, and it causes some problems. It's like
so if we had to take, this has come up a lot recently, actually. The people are asking us like that. What's the one thing that you have taken from the show that you didn't have before the show? And for me, without question, it's frequency and this sort of quantum sort of nature of things, right? And the more guests we have on, now you're the next one in the list, right? Like, it's becoming more and more and more. It just reinforced, I think is the word I was looking for, that it is. Stephen Davis from Nikki, he's like, look, I took plants, I measured their frequency, I piggybacked it on the back of a red light spectrum and deliver it to your wrist. I'm like, that's remarkably simple.
Remarkably simple in the weirdest possible way of doing it. Like, it's like, wow, like, who would have thought to do that, you know?
And so, like, it's wild because this dude can spray you down with like all these frequencies of like allergen relief, pathogen relief, like all these things, and your body takes what it needs and lets the rest kind of flow right through you. And I'm like, and so that got me thinking, I'm like, what if we're just one day in the not so distant future, you just in your family room, there's like bulbs out there that are just shining the shit on you. You got a little cold. Here's that. You do that. You know what I mean? It's just sort of,
well, that's what Daniel Tolson's doing with the sound therapy.
Daniel comes on the show, and that was a mind-blowing episode. He we yammered on. I know you know Daniel, but you yammer on for 90 seconds, and boom, there's this tome that rolls out about you. You're like, what the fuck?
Well, it's all information.
Exactly.
And that's where we're coming from, and I can't tell you the amount of I guess snubs and ridicule I've gotten from colleagues in my field and talking about food as information, and I mean, you're laughing.
I know. No, I believe it, and I mean that kind of brings me to like the big question, which is how do you go from a cardiologist to a chef? Is it, in my head, it's very linear. It is.
Yeah, we skipped our question.
We didn't even ask the fucking
We didn't
even ask the question. But it seems to me that you see this underlying heart disease day in and day out. And the one thing that we're all doing, regardless of stress, regardless of our lifestyle, we're eating. And we're either feeding and fueling or we're hurting ourselves.
Yeah, I actually came at it backwards. So
really?
So indirectly. So I grew up before the internet. I'm way old. And so we moved around a ton as I was growing up. So I was always a new kid. Always kind of making friends or not making friends or being a bit of an outcast. And so a refuge for me, my mom was a really good home cook. And at the time, by the time I got home from school, she had watched You, a Child, and was doing something, funky, or Graham Kerr, the Galloping Gourmet. And so the kitchen became a very safe place for me. You'd go in and then help my mom after school. And I love to cook. I've just always had the interest. So when I went to college, I started as a dishwasher to help make money to get through college. And then just over the course of that time, worked my way up to, what we'd call today an executive chef, nothing fancy. I mean, but what was important, although I didn't know it at the time, it was farm to table cooking. And actually, I guess sort of fish to sea to table cooking as well, because it was in Virginia at the University of Virginia, and the owner, one of the two owners, would go down to Chesapeake Bay twice a week, get us right off the boat fresh fish. And so I got a really good schooling in practical school. I went back and got a degree in cooking and catering, gourmet cooking and catering, but that's where I really learned to cook. And from there, I launched off into medical school, but I always had this passion and love of food, ran a restaurant, where somebody else did the cooking. And the two came back together because I had like really bad personal health challenges. And I looked at like, what can I do? And it was like, Mike, you're eating crap, right? What the drug reps are bringing every day, you're chowing down. I did my training at the home of Krispy Kreme donuts. So when I finished my, ER shift, and I was headed,
and the light was on.
The light was on, man. The light was on. I was there.
That's hilarious. I mean, listen, I can't tell you how many people I've talked to that went from culinary school to being a cardiologist. I mean, it's such a no, I'm fucking with you. Like, how do you go? It's almost weirder that you went at it that way. Like
that way. Yeah, that seems weirder to me.
That seems even worse somehow. I'm like, huh? Like, all right. So
I think there's so many dues you got to pay in both of those careers, like there's so much hazing and having to, claw your way up in both of those, man.
Yeah, one sort of prepares you for the other, if you will. I mean,
Does it really?
You've got interventional cardiologist, which is what I do, right? So back when I did, I was a guy that get called in at 2:00 in the morning. Somebody's having a heart attack. Go in, put a stent in. So it's not considered a surgery in the sense of a surgical OR suite, but it is a very obviously invasive procedure that we do, and we're gowned up in masks and all that. And so the point is, a lot of the people who train me have the temperament of surgeons, and they're throwing scalpels across the room, and they're beat you up. So it is quite it makes you mentally tough. I agree, and I understand sort of the whole thing about bullying, and it can be taken to extremes. But when you're in charge and it's 2:00 in the morning and somebody's life's in your hand, you better have some big boy pants to put on.
Right. Yeah, you can't. This isn't like frailty, right? And actually, our partner Dave says a lot. He's like, my definition of health is not fragile, right? Like, and I feel like that can be, you know what I mean? Like that can be sort of really extrapolated to a lot of things. My daughter's at a arts high school right now, and I told her, I'm like, look, they're going to try everything in their power to get you to wash out in the first year. Like, so just buckle up, because like it should get easier, but like that first year is going to be a bitch, and it has been very challenging, but like, and there's been attrition already. And I said, listen, after this year, they'll know who's got the skin thick enough for this stuff. And I feel like there's value in that, right? Like,
yeah. I mean, I learned that I spent and still do a lot of, I spent my time doing martial arts growing up.
Oh, cool. Which one?
Well, you got comrades here on that. What styles?
Yeah. What do you do?
So I did a couple styles before I focused really, I can say my entire life, adult life, on Bujinkan Budo Taijutsu, which is a Japanese style.
Yeah, and I do jujitsu for 25 years. I don't know.
Yeah, so one of our this is a composite of sort of 9 historical different schools, and one of them is actually a Jutaijutsu school. Mm-hmm. So it was actually really cool. Our origin comes from the time of the samurai, right? Your sword's knocked out, and then how do you kind of get another guy who's in armor? Because certain locks don't apply because the armor restricts the joint movement. Yeah. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, I've played with some of those things. It is funny. I think it's funny, the level of dissection, because like, what is it, 300 and something bones in the body? That's it. Like they all bend the same way for everybody, right? Like,
yeah. So, well, that's exactly right. Yeah.
And it's just interesting how everybody solves that problem, right? Like I've taken kung fu classes, I've taken ninjutsu classes, which I thought was going to be essentially the same thing as jujitsu, completely fucking different. Like nothing, like there's obviously a lot of overlap there, but I'm like, simple things that I would think like you don't need multiple ways of solving, they solve it differently, and I'm like, oh, this is fascinating to me.
Yeah.
So what made you sort of like come back to chef? Did you just sort of like have an aha moment one day? You're like, these things are connected. Like, I mean, what sort of like jolts that into action?
Well, I always kept the cooking interest. I mean, at the beginning, I loved, wine and food and that whole feeling of hospitality. As a chef, you help people and you heal people in a very different way, right? Than put into stent in somebody's coronary artery, but it's healing nonetheless. And then obviously the martial arts background, as much as you can destroy a human body and break those 300 bones, you learn to heal it. And you learn to heal and protect yourself. So, all those kind of aspects kind of became jumbled. And then when I had my health challenge, I said, come on, Mike, what the hell? You know better. You know what real food is. And it's like, well, that's the one thing I know I can do to maybe not have to have this surgery or address this problem. And it was successful. And I was like, wow, all the stuff I was telling people to do about the food to eat and avoid as a cardiologist, that's like completely wrong.
Right.
And because I spent time doing some NIH research with a PhD guy who hated MDs in his lab. So I had to literally beg to get in there and do this research. And then, during the interview, he's like, well, you guys aren't real scientists. You just like pretend on people and you dabble in this and you don't even know what real science is.
Did you show him what one of those locks that does work?
On that armor?
Yeah. I sat there. It said, well, if I don't know, then show me. I'm willing to try if you're willing to teach.
Yeah.
And he said, okay, we'll give you a chance. And I spent 2 years in the lab. And it was hard because he was always riding. There was another doc and there was a surgeon, and he was always riding us harder than anyone else. But it really paid off because he made me learn Richard Feynman type science. Like, here's how you do an analysis. You don't push it off and say, well, we're dealing with people. We can't do real science. We're doing real science, real measurements.
Right.
And so I went back and applied what I learned there to the basis of what the medical recommendations are, right? These guidelines and things. And it's like, holy shit, these are like full of holes. There's no substance to any of this. It's like a lot of opinion, and these people are being supported by this company that
I was just going to ask you where these were formed, because I feel like I mean, we even hear the story of Kellogg, right? A balanced breakfast. Well, the guy had a corn farm.
Yeah.
So
they invented breakfast, right?
Yeah.
Like for the history of the human species, nobody ate a ton in the morning because you had to go out and work. And so it was, maybe something at midday and maybe something in the evening and a little light something in the morning. Nobody sat down had a Denny's Grand Slam. It was a routine thing, in 1542. So, looking at that, and I was like, well, this is all wrong. So I started doing my own research and helped myself. Then I applied it to patients who were willing to listen. Because honestly, the first question I would get after putting a stent in, heart attack, seeing me in the office, doc, can I ever eat a steak again?
Does that make you want to take a steak and smack them across the face with it? I feel like it's like the laziest cognitive question you could possibly ask.
I'm more like, doc, will I ever be able to afford a steak again?
Right, yeah.
Tom, move to Montana. We could split a cow.
I'm sure people hit them all the time on the road.
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah, I mean, one of the most obnoxious things that the show has brought into my life has been people just saying whatever dumb unpacked assumption is on the internet right now, like and you're like, like I don't even have energy to like fight. So now it's turned into like, all right, yeah, sure, okay, well,
You know what? It was probably years ago. There was a Greek researcher, medical doctor, who Greek American, but he published something, and he goes, "I'm going to go out there on this lecture circuit, and I'm going to talk to doctors, and they're gonna fucking skewer me."
Yeah.
He was overturning. He looked at all the research for everything, cholesterol medications, these kind of things. And I think when it got to the public, the article was called something like "Lies, All Lies" or something. So he gets up there and he's expecting a bunch of people in white lab coats to drag him back into an alley and beat him up. And they all went, "Yeah, I can see that."
Yeah.
They gave him no, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like they knew it was wrong too, but the system itself was not moving.
Well, here's a great insight into, because you really nailed it, Tom. So I wrote one of my earlier books, and I gave it to actually a fellow that I'd helped train, who was a prestigious professor now at a leading university. And I was like, Johnny, what do you think of the book? He's like, Mike, I love this. You got like 40 pages of references. This is great, blah, 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 blah. It's like, hey, can I get a testimonial to put on the cover? He's like, love you, Mike, but not enough to get fired.
Yeah.
I support this, and they'll fire me. And so when you talk to people individually, one-on-one, if they're at all open and receptive, and they don't have a dog in the fight, that they're being supported by, KFC or whatever, then a lot of times they're willing to listen. But you get them in a group, and it becomes a sort of dominant logic in the room that, oh no, we have to adhere to whatever the conventional wisdom is, and we've got to deny that and preserve the status quo. And I think that, for speaking as someone who's been in this sort of Western medicine, mainstream medicine, I think that's really where a lot of the problem is, and so much of this is, there are the thought leaders from the universities and the researchers. They're supported by the industry. And so, nobody wants to buck what they say, because then you're labeled a heretic, and,
it's such a weird position to be in, because, I used to think it was all like, oh, all these big corporations are out to get you. And I still believe that. But, somebody was trying to say that, like, oh, the doctors are all in on it. And it's like, I don't necessarily believe it's the practitioners. I believe they're stuck in the same system we're all stuck in, right? Like, they know what's better, but they can't do it or say it for some reason. And it's a shame. And clearly I'm not anti-science, anti-medicine. Right. It just seems like, somebody else, a previous guest of ours, said this, and this is kind of the counterpoint to that, where it's like, look, you'll question the vaccine, but you'll go online and order peptides and inject that into yourself without right. There's a kind of like, which camp are you in? Are you going to take the herbal thing that you bought at the, like at the pharmacy or at the freaking CVS or at which you don't even know if it has the thing in it, or are you going to take the pill? And truth be told, like, you got to watch both sides. Sadly, there isn't somebody like that is consistently the truth.
Well, the other problem is that, like, we talked to somebody, what did they say? They saw 600 patients in a day one time. Like, I was like, and
I don't even know how that's possible.
It was an extreme situation. I forget who just had this conversation. Anyway, whatever the number was, they just had it was a machine gun of patients all day long. Like, you literally one to the next, and you're spending single minutes with each one of them, and it's not, you know what I mean? Like, you're just burning through it. I'm like, somebody who's in that situation is not thinking about shit. Like, they're just in triage mode. Do you know what I mean? They're just like, all right, stamp this, whack that mole. Like, that's it.
Yeah. And I think that is, a lot of the practice patterns is right. There's a lot of pressure. We've really moved away from a majority of, individual practitioners kind of doing their own thing, from adhering to their own rules, their own, guidelines, to more of a corporatized medicine, a hospital health system kind of owns the practice. You make a salary, you're incentivized. But then you have to follow their guidelines, right? Their practice rules, if you will. And so you're not really, in a position a lot of times to sort of to buck those things. And when you're then in that meal, and we love in science for good reason, we love numbers, right? So it's, oh, here's a cholesterol value, you need to be on a medicine.
Right.
I'm not going to spend the time, effort to learn about, oh, there's a type A cholesterol that's a large dense that, actually seems maybe cardioprotective, and a type B that's a small dense associated with diabetes that seems very pro-inflammatory. So they're two different things that don't get differentiated in this, LDL cholesterol measurement. I'm just going to look at a number, and the guidelines say, I give you a statin. Good day, sir. I'll see you in 6 weeks for another lab test.
Yeah. And I laugh about I'm on this like concierge thing, and this guy has like 50 something markers for your lipid profile, and it's like basically, and I'm like, all right, let's whip out the phone book that is the cholesterol version. It's like,
well, even at that level, right? That's new information. That's still relatively new, right?
Oh,
your cholesterol used to, and Matt, you've probably heard me say this. My great grandmother died at 106. At 95, she got a blood test. Her cholesterol was over 300, and the doc goes, "Let's give you a statin." And she goes, "What am I going to do? Die if I don't take it?" She was fucking 95. She was like, "Why am I?"
And my response is, well, how many of your randomized placebo-controlled, double-blinded trials feature, a majority of 95 and older as the patient group?
That is not the demographic in that study. That is definitely not the cohort.
But I mean, even that. I mean, look, George Burns smoking a cigar till he was in his 90s. Like, if that guy quit smoking, that probably would have killed him. You know what I mean? Like, so it's kind of like, all right, listen, man, if you've got these habits or lifestyles that got you to 95, you're probably okay to.
I think the trick was it was the same cigar for like 20 years.
Yeah, might have been.
Well, if people ask me all the time about like blue zones, stuff. And so, I find that study
fraud zones, according to Tom.
No, well, look, there is a researcher who was saying it was a lot of pension fraud, and areas, So I've been trying to get him on the show. He's not responding.
I've read that about how they search such and such, and some of that for the newer ones. But if you look at Dan Buettner's original work, and you look at kind of the original blue zones, what struck me was sort of the things they didn't talk about. So one, there was no like magic goji berry that's all you had to eat. You lived to 106 and you never had a disease. The diets were incredibly varied across the globe, right? But it was predominantly non-ultra processed food. They were these villages, etc. So they were outside of the mainstream areas. The other is that every blue zone, except for Loma Linda, with the 7-day Adventist, and that has a bunch of issues on its own. But all of them had a moderate intake of alcohol in one form or another. Some was wine, some was homebrewed stuff. So it was that sort of combination of like sort of
toxicity,
real
and detoxicity.
Well, no. Here. I wrote this article some years ago when I had a Psychology Today column and I had time to do it on the lymphatic system.
Yeah.
And what was fascinating to me is that moderate alcohol, mouse model, not humans, but moderate alcohol consumption improved the drainage from the lymphatic system. So literally having sort of a moderate alcohol drink, going to sleep when your lymphatic system is supposed to do maximum draining, increased the toxin removal from your brain.
Oh, I don't need to hear stuff like that, man.
Moderate, Tom. Moderate.
What is moderate? But like,
I don't know. It was in Mickey Mouse doses.
It's so crazy. So I watched two of my colleagues, I'm an acupuncturist, argue over a study about caffeine screwing up the adenosine pathway for acupuncture, right? So one of the methods of action they're showing is that Krebs cycle where we're turning ADP to ATP, right? So they gave these mice 75 milligrams of caffeine. 75 milligrams of caffeine is a human cup of coffee. That's like throwing us in a vat.
That's the bacon study where they said bacon is toxic, but when you dose it to humans, it was 400 pounds of bacon at a sitting, which, by the way, I've got to tell you, the lab where we were talking about where I did the research, it was adenosine receptors.
Oh,
that's funny.
wow.
Yeah, so
That's
we
funny.
actually published a paper on a new histamine mast cells having a different. It was a biphasic dose response to his adenosine in mast cells. That was the 2 years worth of work that I did.
Wow.
So it's funny that you say that,
Oh,
and I will.
you got to send me that after we get off. That's
Yeah,
very
That
interesting
sounds
to me.
interesting, actually.
And I want to publicly apologize for the horrible things I did to rodents in the name of that research.
Oh, wow.
We're a stone's throw away from Hopkins. I've got a lot of researchers that come in, and I'm like, you're one of those sick fucks that breaks the necks of rats all day.
Yeah. Next to us is University of Maryland and Hopkins. Like they're both like, under 5 miles from my house. So it's lots of dead rats up in this area.
Lots of dead rats.
Yeah,
Probably a
lots of
bunch
dead
of
rats.
monkeys too,
Yeah.
sadly.
Oh man. But I mean, like the quantum stuff is interesting because now, we're getting into like some really crazy shit because now we're seeing synthetic data being constructed from entropy off a quantum computer. And like, that's super fucking wild because now it gives us the potential to see even stranger connections that we don't yet even know about. And like, you want us to talk about spending 2 years in a lab on one thing. I mean, what if you just like woke up and there was like 1 million new genomes that you get to play with today that just happened overnight? You know what I mean? Like, it's fucking wild to think about where we're going right now.
Well, if we think ultra processed food has led to issues, then when you're making amino acids that don't exist in nature, incorporating them into proteins, making proteins that don't exist, I mean, that's literally, that's more than Pandora's box. That's like our entire night chest sort of stuff. And it's interesting too, because one of the things about looking at food as information is tying it into quantum through entropy, right? So Claude Shannon, in his landmark paper from I think it was 48 or something, when he was working for Bell Labs, and published what has eventually become information theory. Basically, information is a form of entropy, negative form of entropy. So when we talk about information, and this is what we teach in our course at the university. We're often, people often have the wrong idea of what we're talking about. So we say information, and people think information is knowledge, but it's not. Information is simply a choice between alternatives, the simplest of which is yes or no. A binary choice, which leads to computers doing things in zeros and ones, bits. That's where all that comes from. What's very interesting is that through the work of Leo Szilard and Rolf Landauer, then became connected to energy through entropy, showing that information has a physical value. It's worth at body temperature. The cost of erasing 1 bit of information is like 3 times 10 to the minus 21 joules. So it's very small per bit, but it's not zero.
But it's not zero. Now, right.
So when you connect now information to energy, which is connected to matter, you have information as a physical quantity. So it's crazy. A measurable thing. Yeah, we think of it as abstract because information always, I liken it to like information is like someone who's traveling. We don't walk. It's either a car or a plane or something. It's always inside something, and you see the car or the plane, but inside it is the traveler. It doesn't matter what it travels in. It's always the same information. So the example I give when I talk is think of a song. So a singer sings a song in a studio. It becomes digital information. And that digital information then might become light beams as it goes through a fiber optic network and is received by a router. Then it becomes electromagnetic energy till your cell phone or computer picks it up, and then you hit play, and then it becomes those sound waves again, which was the original encoding of that information. And when it hits your ear, it becomes electrochemical energy from those nerve fibers in your ear, and then it goes to your brain, but then your brain has to decode it.
Mm.
And so at every point, it was the same information, just in a different form.
You know, that is the most wild fucking thing to think about. Like, yeah, my head's
Yeah,
spinning.
that was
like you went down.
you should have been you should have been a Thursday night show, is what Matt's saying.
Yeah.
That's it's Friday. It's time for gin.
That's where
for gin, yeah.
That's where the vape pens and the drinks come out. Is Thursday night.
Woo! You know what, though, that is so elegantly described.
Thank you.
And I will definitely like have to write this down from the transcript, because like you not a topic for this show, but like we have a quantum computer company that we have a quantum computer. We get to play with it a lot. Tony Lawrence, who was the CEO of the company, was on our show. We almost broke Tom that day. It was fun.
Oh man. There was just like, you know, it's just like this. You start thinking about how like we don't think about that scenario that you just presented. It just kind of happens, right? You know, we're like, singer does their thing, we hop on Spotify,
like,
throw our headphones on.
What are you talking about?
Like if you thought about that level of detail for everything that happens in our modern world with this godlike technology, you would break. So here's Matt and Tony going, there's 37 different dimensions. How do we find it? Well, we plugged it into the quantum computer, which really doesn't even work yet.
And you know,
it's like, what?
Here's the 3-year-old in me. My brother, who has a degree in quantum computer, it helped us. He's one reason that we use all this in the company that we do. But we were talking about superposition, and so for me, it's really, you know, it's very easy to describe superposition, right? For quantum computing, it's a menu. Right? The order does not exist, yet everything that they can order is in one place. But until the customer says, I order this, and you make it a reality by getting that ticket in the kitchen, the possibility exists that they can order anything on the menu. So superposition is just, you know, it's just a menu.
I love how you went chef with that. You went chef with that.
I had
a big diner menu too.
Yeah, you had a big diner menu. That's funny. But you know what though? Talking about that stuff with people who've never thought about it is actually really challenging. And I finally found a way to describe entropy to somebody that a good friend of both Tom and I's colleague who's got a very interesting way of looking at language. He said, "Oh, entropy's simple," and he rolled this off of his tongue. He's like, take 100 people, flip a coin. Everyone who has heads stays in, and everyone who's got tails goes away. He goes, eventually, you will have one person that got heads the entire time. And I was like, oh, fuck, did you just describe entropy in like dumbest person language ever? I'm like, you did. And I'm like sitting there going, but then you talk to people about superposition and entanglement and you know, slowing shit down to near absolute zero to even make it work at all, like in their heads. And then you say, oh, by the way, everything that ever could exist or will exist is possible as soon as you turn this thing on. And people are like, what does that even mean? And I'm like, it means everything, like, and nothing at all. You know, so it is a spooky space. But like, look, when you're talking about like dialing it back to what we're talking about here, what I find super exciting about how this all comes together is like, we take a saccharin molecule or, you know, any other synthetic anything, right? And we put it through a quantum computer and they say, guess what, folks? Here's a whole bunch of other shit you never knew about this. And then you start getting into like, I don't know if you guys have been following there's a worldwide push against mirrored DNA and what that might like look at. And now they're trying to ban it so that we don't even start.
Can't even have the conversation.
Because like, they're like, dude, you don't understand. This is like it's almost like, I don't know, it could be the conversation we all had when they spun up the collider, and it was like, all right, either we're going to find a new element or we're going to create a black hole.
Yeah,
or we're all gone, you won't notice.
And so like, I'm like, okay, well, it could be that. But I mean, at the same time, like information, I'm a data guy too, which is why I love all your analogies and such here. But like information, the interesting part about it is the more information you have on something, it's almost like now you know how much about that thing you don't know, right? Because it makes
that
it, you're like, look how far we've
come.
Yeah, that hole gets deeper, and you're like, look how far we've come. And you're like, okay, well, that's true, but also true is that if we've come this far, how fucking much farther is it? And the answer is probably infinite, right? Yeah.
Well, I guess there is some calculation, right? There's a limit if the universe is finite to how much information it can contain, because it's a physical quantity. So the end of the universe, again, I kind of go back to the martial arts kind of aspect of things, is like, death is essentially equilibrium, and that's it. So the idea that health is a form of equilibrium seems contradictory to me. So the way we look at it is more, you're just constantly adapting. You're never at equilibrium until you die. So, I was taught, right, it's you're trying to achieve, and ultimately health is all about this point of perfect balance and homeostasis, and then you're fighting things off so you can stay at homeostasis. It's actually, at least in my mind, the exact opposite, where the teeter-totter is always moving, and you're always just kind of trying to stay on the teeter-totter, because it's, one could argue it's sort of the same conversation, but when you flip the perspective, it becomes very different, because then you're constantly adapting.
You're more about the resilience of the whole situation than actually, There's a shiatsu guy, I don't think he's around anymore, named Ohashi. Right. And he tells this story in one of his books where he gets an older gentleman coming in for shiatsu. And the guy goes, well, I had my gallbladder taken out. I had this happen. I had, cancer. I had this. I have COPD. And Ohashi looks at him and he says, wow, you're really healthy. And the old white dude starts like, what the hell is wrong with you, you lunatic? And he goes, yeah, any one of those things would have killed me. And if we frame it like that, it is, look, you're resilient as hell. You're tough. You're mentally tough. You're physically tough. And it's not about being able to go out and knock the shit out of somebody, right? There is an aspect of that to that. But it is about how resilient are you to your environment. Right. So, even when and look, I'll take a piss at Dave Asprey all the time, but like he's worried about kale. If kale is the thing that fucking takes me out, man, I don't like kale, but like I just I'm not like worried about the oxalates in it. I'm like, that's not going to be the thing that kills me.
Yeah.
Tom, that is, I never really thought, that is fantastic. I'm totally stealing that from you. I will footnote you.
Whatever.
That's brilliant.
Whatever.
Yeah. I mean, it does strike. Going back to your earlier point, Mike, like, if you just ate, or Tom, I don't know who said it, but if you just ate right, like oxalates, I don't think would be, even on your menu of.
No, but even like Dr. Mike said here, right? A little bit of alcohol gets that lymphatic system going. It's like, but that's phase 1, phase 2 liver detoxification. We get that by taking things that stimulate the body to detoxify itself, right? It's not, let's go do, pounds of cocaine off of a stripper, but there is a little bit of stimulation when we have a substance, but, processed food and a diet of that is not the same thing.
and we know so little about food. I mean, you talk about sort of the more we know, the less we know. The more we know, the more we know that we don't know, sort of thing, right? So, and this is one of my sort of pulpit points that gets me going. Is people say, well, Mike, but you can't just ignore all the nutrients. Okay. So you look at about 150 nutrients or so is what's in the USDA database. Garlic alone has over 5,000 compounds. So now let's kind of put those together in the amount of choices. And Julia Menichetti from Harvard's done some great work looking at all these kind of compounds and how many are them. And when I last spoke with her about it in almost a year ago in March, they were up to around 140,000 compounds in food, in various sorts of foods. That's the sum.
Wow.
We're looking at 150. So if you take 140,
Yeah.
if you take 140,000,
So close.
yeah, exactly. And no wonder we don't know. It's you take 140,000, that is like 10 to the 40,000th power, roughly, just binary choices, right? So there's 10 to the 80 atoms in the universe. So,
Right.
so how are you telling me that you knowing 150 of those when there's, almost 150,000, and you're surprised you can't predict anything, right? It's, to me, the analogy is like, I'm going to sit down and read Hamlet by Shakespeare, but the only letter I know is A.
Right.
I'm not going to get a whole lot out of it.
Well, and that's where I think the power of these new, frontier techs like quantum and all that, know, is interesting, because now you could take a bulb of garlic, you can put in those, 5,000 constituent parts, and you could put in the other 135,000 that are in other food. And now you could start making very weirdly strategic choices based on data that we can never uncover, because it's a compilation nightmare. Like, how do you even, we don't even have the tools to codify that.
So I'll give you an example to go back to the steak that my patients would ask me about. So eat a ultra processed burger at the drive-thru. Okay, very different than a steak. Very different than if you eat that with some garlic. Why? Because garlic, red wine vinegar, and some other compounds contain a compound called DMB. Meat, one of the thoughts of potential association with like heart disease, kidney disease, etc., is that it's broken down by our body into something called TMA, trimethylamine, and that's perfectly harmless. But gut bacteria take that and transform it into something, they oxidize it. So because TMAO, that turns out to be somewhat inflammatory and a good predictor, a blood level of subsequent risk for heart disease, etc. Totally dependent on gut bacteria, not cholesterol or anything else. But if you eat that and meat along with certain plants and things, beets is another one, high in choline, etc. If you eat that red meat, like I said, with the garlic, red wine, vinegar, etc., the DMB prevents that certain bacteria from converting TMA into TMAO. So you wonder, and the question, that Julia proposed, and I think it's a good one. This sort of let's look at an Italian menu of, hey, we like garlic and olive oil and red wine with our meat. Is it a flavor driven issue? Or is it somehow an understanding somehow in the past of how these work together?
I have a very weird postulation here that our flavor profile and preferences may be influenced by the needs of our body.
Oh, yeah.
We have that nature all over the place.
Yeah, well, and then I have a follow-up question. What bacteria is it? Is it a symbiotic bacteria, or is it one that I want to stomp out of my gut?
No, it's a normal gut flora inhabitant. I think I can't remember because there's some species, but I think it's a Proteus. But I can get to the information, from those studies.
I'm not going to worry about it if you say it's it's not one I got to kill off.
No. But it does. I think that a lot of what tastes good to us is informed by this gut bacteria telling us, and then reinforcing that information to our brains as taking that in. And one of the things about ultra processed foods is they're great deceivers, right? Because something tastes sweet, but it doesn't deliver glucose, and so all of a sudden the playbook doesn't make sense. We've evolved that, I taste this savory umami piece of meat, and I'm going to get XYZ at XYZ time at time T, and all of a sudden none of that's delivered. And so it's misinformation, disinformation, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
But it confuses us. And you would love this, Matt. So in our model of how food is information, what that does is increase variational free energy for an organism. And it puts it at a state that we don't want to be at. And then how do we deal with that? Well, one of the ways that we can deal with it, for example, is the way we deal with any data set we're unfamiliar with. Take more samples.
Okay.
That can be a root cause of why people overeat with ultra processed food.
Sure.
Because Kevin Hall did a very interesting study to me. He had people taste a very nice, like a chef might prepare, minimally processed diet, but yummy food, done really well. And then he gave them ultra processed food, which we often say, oh, well, it's hyper palatable and people become addicted, which is true in and of itself. But he had them grade it like, is one much more tasty than the other? And both were good. So if it's not necessarily a flavor thing that's driving us to eat more in terms of ultra processed food, what is it? Well, this does potentially, explain one of the causes of those, or one of those mechanisms.
Yeah, that's pretty fascinating right there.
I look at this, like my take on this, Tom, is a little different. It's like when we had that conversation about cows, if you put them out in a pasture, in Ireland, if a cow's sick or if a cow's happy or if the cow's sad, they just know what food to eat. Like they'll go to the right spot in the pasture, they'll do their thing, right? To me, as far as I'm aware, there's no cows with a PhD in nutritional science, right? Like, so like they just know how to do it. Like it's just
there's something fundamental about being a cow. And by the way, man, you described a pretty damn good dinner there. I just want to say the steak, the red wine, a little garlic butter, side beet salad sounds amazing right now.
But like I will tell you, I don't think that if you gave me that same test, like my family loves McDonald's. My kids are like fucking lunatics on it. And I have a visceral reaction to McDonald's. Like my body revolts. Like I like the smell of it, the sight of it, like the taste of it for sure. It is just immediately repugnant to me. I can't,
I call it the post McMortem.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just, but like, you know what? I kind of feel like I'm that cow in a pasture. My body's like, nope.
Well, that's one of the fascinating things where I do stay up and think about these things. And it's like, where does that information come from? Right.
Yeah.
So that's the question, because there's not like a space where there's DNA contains information, but that information is modulated by our environment through all these epigenetic influences, turning the switches on and on. So DNA is kind of like a blueprint, but like you said, it's not somewhere in the cow's DNA is not something like eat dandelion root if you've got a tummy ache. So, but it knows how to do that. It knows how to find it. Yeah. And how, where
it knows what it looks like.
It
remembers where it's at in the field. Like, I mean, it's got all there's so many like layers to that, right? Like it's not just a knowledge thing, right? Like, and look, we don't know. You're right. Yeah. DNA contains a ton of information, but like, are these memories? I mean, we've talked to past life people.
Look, like, man,
like, it gets real weird when you start looking at past life. Like if you accept past lives as a potential, then like having stored memories from other time frames is part of the process there.
Well, you've heard about the transplant issues, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I was in training, we were one of the early cardiac transplant centers. And that's just crazy, It's
crazy.
But again, there's other things, like somebody has a stroke in England and wakes up speaking Swahili.
Right.
Okay.
We had Jeff Tarrant on.
Yeah.
Who he's a psychologist. He was working at a University of Missouri in the student health department. He had one of his interns say, "Can you do an EEG on my mom?" And he goes, "Oh, well, what's going on?" He goes, "Well, she went to a holotropic breathwork course, came out speaking in tongues, recorded it, put it on the internet. An anthropologist heard it and went, no, you're not speaking in tongues. you're speaking 3 Amazonian tribal languages and it's all about love. And he's like, no, this is really what you're saying. And he does this EEG on her, and her brain is performing in a way that is not, let's say, a normal daily functioning state, but that sent him down this rabbit hole of recording all these people who have ESP and psychic ability. Yeah. And then he was tied to the telepathy tapes where he's doing nonverbal autistic children who have this kind of psychic bond with each other. It is insane to think about. And then Matt heard me trying to get a God helmet for a while, right? Which literally was pulsed electromagnetic fields around your head so you can have a out-of-body experience. I talked to the student of Dr. Michael Persinger. He's still out there. Todd Murphy is at a college on the west coast of Canada. And he wrote this book where he was basically using reincarnation as a way to carry forth information. So we don't have to relearn everything. So those innate things.
But we don't relearn. You know, we don't relearn. They just come out.
They just do. But that was his case with humans. Like, give any kid a phone, and they're going to know how to do almost half the shit on it. And it's not just because the phone's intuitive. It's very weird, man.
Yeah, it's
all right. I got out there for a minute. I'm sorry, I rambled.
No, I'm right out there with you, totally lost in space. I mean, it's like you said, it's the part that people just kind of shove out.
Yeah.
But just because you ignore it doesn't mean it's not real. So I often have this conversation with folks. It's like, well, we were talking about, the cholesterol levels. You look at it, you give it a pill.
Yeah.
We have plenty of equally good data showing that people who are in stable relationships, loving relationships by the metrics we can measure, have less heart disease. All other things that we know of that we can measure accounted for.
Mm-hmm.
And if they do have a heart attack, it's smaller. They recover quicker, and they're less prone to having another myocardial infarction. But we never talk to people in the office or about like emotional health and they like, why? Probably because Dr. Mike can't sit there and write every morning 22 love units, please.
Yeah,
if I did, I'd probably go right to prison. Somebody honestly, going Dr. Mike said I got to get love units every morning.
Dr. Mike, what the fuck are you talking about?
We do not have the vocabulary. We do not have the understanding of it yet, and it's that unquantified. And it's really interesting. We have a couple of people coming on from the Institute of Noetic Science coming up. And this is like parapsychology. And one of the people that's coming up just gave a lecture at Harvard Medical School. And literally in his Instagram post, he's like, 10 years ago, they wouldn't even have let me on campus.
Yeah. Right.
It's like, I just want to thank you guys, because after being here with you, the idea that food is information seems like so boring.
It wasn't. No way.
Are you kidding me?
But it's brilliant. Think about
awesome.
it. But that's everything, right? Is it even energy, right? Is it a particle? Is it a frequency? Is it a wavelength? Well, it's both. And
it is a constituent, the way we look at it, right? And this always made me think, because there's, again, if you go back to all these sort of ancient cultures and things, it's always 3, right? It's a triple-headed guys and blah, blah, blah. And yet we only had 2 features of the universe. We had matter and energy. If you think of information as a primary constituent, that is, and you could convert information into, they've done information engines, right? So where information is converted to energy and performs useful work, right? It's at the electron level.
Cool.
It's in somebody's lab,
sure,
but it's done, right?
Yeah.
We have that proven. I will send you guys. We're putting together a manuscript that details this, along with a glossary. So if you're interested in reading it, I'd love to get your feedback on it.
The answer to any of those questions is fuck it.
If you come on the show and you say, "Hey guys, I want you to," we're 99% of the time going to be like, "Yeah, all in." Let's
put
go.
it this way. We always have to say 99%, but to date, it has yet to happen. So
Well, I think we're reserving for the one we're pretty sure we'll die if we do that. We're gonna. That one seems unnecessarily risky for us. We're gonna bow out of that one.
But just to round out the woo a little bit, because I wanted to kind of jump in.
But isn't this fucking amazing? We're sitting here with a fucking cardiologist having this conversation, which wouldn't have happened 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Well, but
Sure.
here's what I want reflection on, Doc. I think we get to do this show. We get to talk a lot of people, right? Every time I leave the show, something else becomes intuition now. Does that make sense? It's like that intuition muscle of mine just keeps growing. So now when you came on and you're like, food is information, I'm like, of course it is. Of course.
Yeah.
It wasn't even like a question mark. So I wasn't even and then you're like, people look at me weird or whatever. I'm like, really? How? It's like disagreeing with gravity. You're like, I mean, you know what do you mean you don't believe in gravity? What, it just seems so
believe me, there's
obvious.
people. There's people.
I'm sure that would be a fun game.
I mean, it is so amazing.
Find the group on the internet that believes in that thing. You're like, there's got to be an anti-gravity. Gravity is a myth, group out there on Reddit. And that's where I think we are going. And I think that summarily, it's the thing that's exciting about now is that if you're paying attention, building this really broad intuition about a lot of things is really possible, and way more possible than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. You just have to want to do it. And I think that's the part that gets us all in trouble, right? Because it's way easier to be Wally than it is to be Feynman, right?
There's work and there's risk, and it's what you said earlier. You have to be comfortable with a thick skin. And in retrospect, all that martial arts training I did, decades ago and through the decades, really sort of gave me that the strength of spirit, if you will, to say, it's okay. Musashi wandered alone for many years through the wilderness, constantly on quest. I could do the same, and hopefully I'll retire and paint and write a bestseller. What'll be a bestseller? 500 years later.
Did he know it was a bestseller when he wrote it?
Probably not.
Probably not.
But the beauty is he didn't care, right? So
it was creation for the sake of creation at that point too. Yeah.
So where do you go from here, Chef Doctor? How do we,
I think we got to move to Montana between him and Dr. Justin Elliott or Elliott Justin. We got two contacts out there, and they're both a hell of a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So my life's taken some odd twists. I had a career-ending, a traumatic back injury a couple of years ago, which was tough, and it was tough to step away from your identity as an interventional blah 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 blah. But long story short, I'm here talking to you guys today because it gave me 100% of time to focus on this door in my life.
Yeah.
So as that door shut, and to be honest,
Nothing
I fought it,
brother. You know that.
Yeah, I was like, no, I can, do this, and sort of the struggles it's entailed. So, where we are is, combining technology, with this idea of food as information, and going back to kind of the idea of a chef and a doctor, which is, how do we get this so people can use it every day where they don't have to think about it, but this is what's driving recommendations and thoughts and things that can help them in the future? Because when they do that, then we can get the data where I can come back and say, hey, because the paper, as I will send you guys this, it's a theoretical paper because nobody's done this before.
Done it, yeah.
And so it says, this is what we predict we should be able to find. Some of which is fascinating to me. For example, one of the things is if you eat ultra-processed food, you should lose heart rate variability as a measure of ultra-processed foods' impact via free energy on your autonomic nervous system.
Makes sense.
We think,
hold on. Why do you have to lose that?
Well, but if you're saying that, sorry, Matt, because
No.
I got, oh my God, that's
I'm
amazing.
just curious, like, why do you have to lose that? I don't understand. I don't get that.
You don't have enough energy to regulate your HRV.
Oh.
Well, it's so the heart rate variability is basically autopilot, right? That's your autonomic nervous system. So if you had to sit there and say, breathe in, out, which I do at certain times.
I was just gonna say,
yeah. but
I do this from time to time.
but most of the time we don't have to say breathe in, breathe out, because it's in the background. And however, if I stuck your head underwater, all of a sudden breathing after a certain period of time, breathing is all you're thinking about, right? It's gone from the autonomic nervous system to the prefrontal cortex to say, hey, we're having a red light emergency. In much the same way, if you're running a company, you don't want your secretary coming in and go, I just talked to so-and-so on the phone, everything's fine, and go back out and come back in and go back out and come back in. Notify me when there's a problem.
Right.
And so your autonomic nervous system is doing all those things, which includes a lot of the things involved in food and eating. When you eat a lot of ultra-processed food, the free energy goes up, which means you have to devote more energy, focus, etc., onto saying, okay, as I said, we're supposed to be getting glucose in 20 minutes down in the small intestine. There's no glucose here. What the fuck's going on? Why don't we have glucose? So what that does is decrease heart rate variability. So that's just one of the physical manifestations, a proxy, if you will, for that type of effect on the on the autonomic nervous system. We know that when people are ill, as a cardiologist, I can measure their heart rate variability and say, oh, this person's not going to do well in the CCU or ICU because they've lost heart rate variability. It's a very bad prognostic sign. So, that would be one of the things that, for example, we propose that, we could measure that, and people do measure it. But what's very interesting was there was a study that was just published like 2 weeks ago looking at people who have substance use issues, addictive behaviors. And what they found was they did biofeedback that improved heart rate variability in the test group, which reduced substance use, relapse, and cravings by 64%, which is totally in line with the tenets of our hypothesis here. So that's a type of stuff that we'll be able to get. By helping people and measuring things.
That's so cool.
So the tech you think is, listen, you don't have to convince me on tech, but like it seems like you're of the mindset that the tech is really going to kind of help us in this phase, right? Like, yeah. So like when you get into those things, do you kind of advise patients or clients, yours, whatever guests, whatever you're calling them? But like, do you have to like just tell people, hey man, while we work on your processed food problem, just stop looking at your HRV and whoop. Like just let's not even look at that for a minute. Is that kind of
the average person is, doc, can I ever eat a steak again? Which is fine.
Yeah.
And so we want to take all that burden away from them. We'll look at those things and we'll see what we can sort out. And we're doing some we did beta testing already, testing the hypothesis. Does the way we do this decrease ultra processed food consumption? That was yes. Now we're looking at some other things and beta testing the tech aspect of it. And I can already tell you, one of my hypotheses was diet is not random. So, the recommendations that this country gives people, and I know RFK Jr. says we'll be getting new ones in December next month, but, they're based on like a 72-hour food survey recall from 3 days, twice a year from 5,000 people in, the NHANES study or something. And from that pool of data, that's where all these recommendations come from. So as we've talked about this entire, podcast, that's some pretty crappy data set to
sampling is
base recommendations for 300 million people. So, one of the thoughts is, that this diet is not some random 3-day thing, but it's quite stochastic. But you need large data to tease it out because it varies. So So one of the interesting things to me is like, wow, these people are eating different things, every day, looking at some of their diet. But when I look at their percent ultra processed food consumption, it's within 5 to 10% every meal. But it's different items. And that was like one thing that I had not expected to see. That sort of non-random factor in there, that somehow people are kind of, eating their baseline, which again, if you think that we sort of reset or we exist in kind of familiar territory, then you would expect that, oh, well, this is what they're used to. So this is what they're going to keep doing. And they're going to add these foods, much like the cow adding those ingredients when they're out there unknowingly, to get to these certain levels. So, it's sort of day after day, somebody's at 40% ultra processed food, somebody else is at 70. What's great for us in terms of our market is, right, the average American's at 70%. So that there's a lot of room. Yeah, there's a lot of room to go there.
Woo.
And it's funny, you always look at all the diet, check this out, you'll lose 10 pounds in the first week. And then like the first thing is like, you got to stop drinking soda. I'm like, I haven't had a soda in like 10 years. They're like,
when you're clean and trying to get that last little bit off, it's a very different story. It's like, I don't do that.
And I can't tell you, you could like it, you could just see the needle getting popped into their balloon. They're all of a sudden they're like, no, this diet's not going to work for you. I'm like, oh, yeah, exactly. And I know it ahead of time. I'm being a dick on purpose in that regard, like when I do that. But like at the same time,
But see, so you hit on a key for me, right? Which is like the way to help people is never to tell them what they can't have, because that's what they immediately want.
Yeah, of course.
So for me, it was like, okay, if I'm designing this for me, it's like, I was born in New York City. I'm a New York City pizza guy. I'm a pizza slut. Let's be honest, right?
Okay.
I love pizza and all kinds of pizza. And it's like, I'm not giving up pizza. So how can I craft or obtain a pizza that meets the requirements? Well, that's easy. I make my own pizza.
Sure.
And the Italians actually did the study where they looked at ultra processed, your Pizza Hut pizza and Domino's and whatever, versus like their pizza that you would get at, in Naples.
The cafe or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is what we would classify as a processed, but not ultra processed food, and showed like huge difference in the outcomes of diets and so forth. So it can be, so my question is not, don't do this. It's like, okay, well, if you love soda, what is it you love about soda? Because I had the same thing. I realized at one point, it's like, I'm drinking half a case of Diet Coke because I drink coffee in the morning, and then I was working in the lab till like 10 or 11 at night. And so I would fire up Diet Cokes to keep me going through the afternoon. What I loved was the carbonation fizz. So I was able to break myself, like you, Matt, decades ago, by doing
doing seltzer. Yeah.
Right. And lime and things in there. Yeah.
I've got one of those.
A good slug of gin.
I got one of those soda streams. It's been like the greatest invention ever.
Just one of those Tom Collins.
You're just like, you're just kind of. I don't drink tonic anymore. It was another thing I got rid of years ago. But like when people come over, I'm like, I could just make you a single tonic, and like you could make it fizzier or not. And I think it's funny that you noticed that, because I'm like, what I realized is I liked fizz as well. I just I didn't need it to be tonic. And now if a waiter at a restaurant gives me tonic by accident, like I am like instantly like, it's almost like the cartoon where you're like, and I'm like, oh, like, I cannot drink this. And it's funny because my wife looks at me and like shakes her head immediately. She's like, tonic, right? I'm like, tonic. Yeah. It's bad.
And so I do want to share with you, Matt, this shout out goes to my wife, because she's a genius, and she is Irish.
Smart man, you're smarter than you were a minute ago.
And she loves gin, and so I will pass along one of the best. I don't know if you've had High Claire.
Yeah.
I love High Claire.
No, it's great. So we can go on to this some other time, but like I have tasted hundreds of gins. Like, I mean, it's a whole thing. It's actually last night, funny enough, there's a Israeli gin that I first got introduced to years ago. And this guy finally has it It's called Thinker's Gin. It's amazing. It's hard to find, but it's amazing. And I'm like, who thinks of Israel? So it's like when you think of gin, you're like, I mean, I don't think of that.
I would say you don't think of Japanese whiskey, and some of my favorite whiskeys. Yeah,
that Nika coffee gin.
Ushikabale
is. Oh yeah, I have not had that one.
Ushikabale, that's Gaelic for whiskey, which is means
water of life.
Yeah.
Water of life. Got it.
Yeah. You can get the T-shirt at the Northern Ireland distillery. That's how I know.
Oh my God.
Listen, Chef Doctor, we gotta like send you on your way here. I think people are gonna stop listening here.
Where do they find you?
Well, we gotta find you. We gotta go. We gotta do the commercial, man. What okay.
So they
drop your book titles, all of it.
Chef Dr. Mike, chefdrmike.com. Also at Bridgemed, BRIDG, no E, MED.health is where we're at. And I got to tell you guys, I've done probably thousands of podcasts over the year. You guys are my favorite podcast.
Oh my God,
I'm so honored. This has been, I mean, because I just got to talk about all the stuff that I like.
Yeah,
that's why we fucking do this, man. Yeah. Like, we just want to have really fun conversations about a topic that we don't get to hear enough about.
Yeah. And not to beat up the cow metaphor, but let's do that. I think that there's a thing that this is sort of like the conversational equivalent of the cow finding the food it needs, right? It's like we ask people more or less the same question every time. We're like, how'd you get here? Funny enough, we did not do that with you, but and
we got to it.
People are like, they get all nervous. They're like, what do you mean? How do I get to the show? How do I do this? How do I do that? I'm like, listen,
just answer it.
Just let the energy take you where it goes, man. And they're like, I don't know what that means, but okay. Some people know what it means. I'm like, however you answer that is kind of where you need to be today. And let's meet you there and have a fucking awesome conversation.
I feel like it is the perfect recipe of not having a recipe. You know, if that makes any sense. You know, it just kind of happens.
Yeah. And everyone's selling something though. And we love to promote it all and all that. But like my favorite are when like their PR people are like, could you please provide a list of questions you will be asking?
Like, we send them the how did you get here? The question here. Here is the topics we will definitely be asking you.
Yeah.
So
I'm like,
I'll leave you guys with my sort of send off and thoughts on things is that may the only pain in your life ever be champagne.
Yeah, there you go. Love it. Chef Dr. Mike, thank you so much, dude. That was great. Stick around.
We needed today.
Around. We got to make sure we are good. But otherwise, man, thanks again and have a good weekend. Guys.
You too.
Be subversive, irreverent.
Health is wealth, but you knew that.
Everybody knows that.
But so is following us on social media at Irreverent Health. And check out our website for more exclusive content at irreverenthealth.com.
Oh, I like this.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Irreverent Health.